Imagine looking behind you and seeing a real tail attached to your body. Sounds impossible, right? But millions of years ago, your ancestors actually had one. So what happened? Why do monkeys still have tails while humans don't? And what if losing our tails came with a hidden genetic trade-off that still affects babies today? The answer is one of evolution's greatest mysteries. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at your own spine the same way again. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Have you ever wondered why dogs wag their tails? Cats use them for balance, monkeys swing with them, but humans don't have one at all? It's one of those questions that seems simple at first, but the deeper scientists looked into it, the stranger the answer became. Because the story isn't just about losing a body part, it's a story about survival, about evolution, about a tiny mutation hidden inside our DNA, and possibly one of the biggest sacrifices our species ever made. To understand why humans lost their tails, we need to travel back nearly 25 million years, long before cities, long before language, even long before humans existed. Back then, our ancient ancestors lived high in tropical forests. These early primates looked nothing like modern people. Their bodies were covered with fur. Their brains were much smaller. And yes, they all had tails. For millions of years, tails were incredibly useful. They acted like balancing poles while climbing branches. They helped animals make sharp turns while running. Some species even use their tails to communicate emotions. And in certain monkeys today, tails are so powerful that they can actually grab tree branches like an extra hand. These are called prehensile tails. Imagine having a fifth limb growing from your spine. Nature found that incredibly useful. So here's the mystery. If tails were such an amazing evolutionary advantage, why would humans ever lose them? Evolution usually doesn't throw away something that's useful, unless something even more valuable replaces it. Around 25 million years ago, something extraordinary happened. A group of primates began evolving into what scientists call apes. This group would eventually include chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, gibbons, and, much later, humans. Unlike monkeys, every living ape shares one unusual characteristic. None of them have tails. That means whatever caused tails to disappear happened before humans even existed. In other words, you didn't lose your tail. Your entire family tree lost it millions of years before modern humans appeared. But why? For decades, scientists debated this mystery. Some believed tails simply became unnecessary. Others thought standing upright slowly made them disappear. Those explanations sounded reasonable, but there was a huge problem. Evolution doesn't work that quickly. Body parts don't simply vanish because they stop being useful. Whales still have tiny hip bones. Snakes still carry hidden remnants of legs. Even humans have wisdom teeth, goosebumps, and tiny muscles that once moved our ears. Evolution leaves behind evidence. So why didn't tails leave the same kind of visible reminder? Actually, they did. Right at the bottom of your spine. If you place your hand on your lower back, you'll find a small triangular bone called the coccyx, or tailbone. It doesn't look like much, but it's actually made from several tiny vertebrae fused together. Those vertebrae are the last remaining pieces of an ancient tail. In other words, every human still carries the fossil of a tail inside their body. It's one of evolution's quietest reminders of where we came from. But here's where things become even more fascinating. Before you're born, you actually grow a tail. That's right, every human embryo develops a visible tail during the early weeks of pregnancy. For a short period, that tail contains several vertebrae and extends beyond the developing legs. If someone looked only at that stage of development, they would never guess the embryo would become a human instead of another tailed mammal. Then something remarkable happens. As development continues, special biological processes reshape the body. Most of the tail is gradually absorbed back into the embryo. Remaining vertebrae fuse together, forming the coccyx. By the time a baby is born, the external tail has disappeared. It's almost like evolution briefly replays millions of years of history. then quietly erases the evidence before birth. But sometimes, nature doesn't completely finish the process. In extremely rare cases, babies are born with small, tail-like structures. These are often called human tails, although many aren't true functional tails like those of monkeys. Some contain fat, connective tissue, muscles, or nerves. True tails, containing fully developed vertebrae, are exceptionally rare. These unusual births remind scientists that the ancient genetic blueprint for building a tail hasn't completely disappeared. Instead, it's been switched off. And that raises an even bigger question. Who switched it off?
For decades, no one knew. Scientists searched through countless genes trying to find the answer. Then, in recent years, researchers made a discovery that completely changed the story. They identified changes in a gene called TBXT, a gene that plays a critical role during early embryonic development. This gene helps guide how the spinal column forms in the earliest stages of life. Researchers found that a specific genetic change may have altered how this gene works in the ancestors of apes. The result? Instead of growing a long tail, the embryo begins shutting down tail development much earlier. It's an incredibly small change inside DNA, yet it may have permanently changed the future of an entire branch of life on Earth. Think about that for a second. A tiny mutation, invisible to the naked eye, may have helped create every chimpanzee, every gorilla, every orangutan, and eventually, every human who has ever lived. But evolution is rarely free. Every advantage usually comes with a price. And according to scientists, the very mutation that helped eliminate our ancestors' tails may also have introduced an unexpected risk that still exists today. A hidden evolutionary trade-off, one that could affect human babies before they're even born. And that's where this mystery becomes even more surprising. So, if a tiny genetic change helped our ancestors lose their tails, why would evolution keep that change? The answer lies in one of the biggest transformations in the history of life. Millions of years ago, the ancestors of apes began spending less time running along thin branches and more time climbing tree trunks, hanging beneath branches, and eventually moving across the ground. Their entire bodies started to change. Their shoulders became more flexible, their arms grew longer, their chests became broader, and their spines evolved to support a completely different style of movement. In that new body design, a long tail may no longer have been an advantage. In fact, it may have become unnecessary. Without the need for balancing on narrow branches the way many monkeys still do today, the tail gradually lost its purpose. Instead of investing energy into growing a long tail, evolution favored other improvements that better matched an ape's lifestyle. Every change in evolution comes with a cost. If a feature no longer improves survival or reproduction, natural selection doesn't necessarily preserve it forever. Over countless generations, the tail disappeared. But something much more important was taking shape: a stronger lower back, a more stable pelvis, and eventually, the ability to stand and walk on two legs. Now, it's important to understand something. Scientists do not believe that humans lost their tails simply because they started walking upright. The timeline doesn't fit. Apes had already lost their tails millions of years before the first human ancestors became fully bipedal. Instead, losing the tail may have been one of several earlier changes that helped make later adaptations possible. Evolution doesn't usually happen in giant leaps. It builds one small change on top of another, over millions of years, like placing one brick after another until an entirely new structure appears. And then came the discovery that surprised scientists the most. When researchers studied the TBXT gene, they found evidence suggesting that the same mutation involved in tail loss might also slightly increase the chance of certain spinal development problems. One example is a condition known as spina bifida, where the spinal column doesn't form completely during early development. Scientists are still studying this possible connection. It doesn't mean the mutation directly causes the condition in every case. Many genes and environmental factors are involved. But it does suggest something fascinating. The evolutionary change that helped define every modern ape may also have carried a biological trade-off. Nature rarely gives something for nothing. Sometimes, a mutation provides a huge long-term advantage, even if it introduces a small risk along the way. That idea appears again and again throughout evolution. The gene that protects against one disease may increase the risk of another. A feature that improves survival in one environment
may become less useful in another. Evolution isn't trying to create perfection. It simply favors traits that improve the chances of passing genes to the next generation. And that's exactly what makes the story of the human tail so remarkable. It's not a story about becoming perfect. It's a story about change, about compromise, about millions of years of tiny genetic decisions shaping every human alive today. Even now, your body still carries evidence of that ancient history. Your tailbone quietly supports muscles and ligaments that help stabilize your pelvis. It no longer swings behind you. It no longer helps you balance. But it still serves important functions inside the body. It's a reminder that evolution rarely erases the past completely. Instead, it rewrites it. Sometimes scientists even discover people born with small, tail-like structures, reminding us that the genetic instructions for building a tail haven't completely vanished. They've simply been modified over millions of years. It's like finding an old blueprint hidden inside a modern building. Most of the design has changed, but traces of the original plan still remain. Perhaps that's the most fascinating part of this entire mystery. Every human being carries the story of evolution inside their own body, not only in our DNA, but in our bones, our muscles, and even in the tiny tailbone we rarely think about. The next time you sit down, remember, you're resting on one of the oldest evolutionary souvenirs your species still possesses. A silent reminder that your ancestors once climbed through ancient forests with long tails stretching behind them. Millions of years later, that tail is gone, but its story lives on inside every one of us. And maybe that's the greatest lesson evolution teaches. We are not separate from nature. We are one chapter in a story that has been unfolding for hundreds of millions of years. Every mutation, every adaptation, every survival has shaped who we are today. The disappearance of the human tail wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was one small step in an extraordinary evolutionary journey that eventually led to modern humans. And who knows, millions of years from now, what parts of our own bodies will future evolution decide we no longer need? That question may be just as fascinating as the mystery of the tail we left behind.